Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the Why Should I Get Help for My Relationship episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. I coach men who are struggling in relationship, how to communicate effectively, build trust, and deepen intimacy so they can be the best version of themselves in relationship and live the life they love. So why should you get help for your relationship? How much time you got? Man, there are so many reasons why you should get help if you are struggling, having difficulty in your current relationship, or if your past relationships didn't work out. An obvious reason is because you want the relationship to work, right? And getting help should be for you, and ultimately your relationship will benefit. Well, I have to say, it's a lot easier said than done. And frankly, it scares the hell out of most men because it requires them to take a look at themselves, to own their part in why the relationship may not be working or struggling, and to take action to make changes to do something about it. Seeking help when struggling in a relationship takes strength and courage and commitment, and is a major step on your path to love that can lead to personal growth, improved well-being, and a stronger, more satisfying relationship. And it's so important to remember that seeking help doesn't mean that you're weak or less than a man. No, it shows that you are committed to your relationship's health and vitality for the long run. Now, I've got plenty of reasons to share as to why you should get help if you're struggling in relationship. But first, I'd like to share with you what can happen if you don't get help when you're having a hard time in relationship. I can't help but think of Pete, not his real name. He was crazy in love with his wife, Portia, not her real name. He had this vision of a long life together with Portia, and he had vowed that he would do anything for her. Well, a few years after they got married, Pete started getting a lot of negative feedback from Portia. Things like he doesn't listen to her, that he gets defensive or shuts down when she wants to talk about their marriage, that he doesn't show empathy, it's all about him, blah, blah, blah. It's really the typical stuff I hear women say about the men they're in relationship with, which I could certainly relate because I did a lot of the same stuff. Well, anyway, Portia really wanted to make their marriage work and not put all the blame on Pete. So she made a lot of suggestions. She tried to get them to do couples counseling. She shared articles, books, videos, podcasts. She discussed doing a couples retreat, offering all kinds of things to help improve the relationship. And Pete totally resisted. Well, in talking to one of her friends about the situation, Portia found out about me. And her friend said that I had been helpful for her husband. And Portia thought since I'm a coach, not a therapist, and that I'm a man, she thought that Pete might go for it. What did she have to lose? Well, guess what? Pete said, nope, ain't gonna happen. And he basically told her that you can take me as I am or leave me. Well, so much for doing anything for her, right? Well, Portia was at a loss here, and she felt that she had tried everything to make their marriage work, and it just wasn't happening. She still loved Pete, but felt like she couldn't go on with the marriage being one-sided in terms of effort and commitment. So she filed for a legal separation, hoping that Pete might see the light, wake up and do something. And she asked Pete to find somewhere else to stay. Well, Pete refused to leave their apartment, and he told her if she wanted a separation, that she would have to find a place to stay. So Portia made arrangements to stay with a friend until she got her own place. And she started going to therapy and got a real strong sense of herself. And she ended up filing for divorce and moved on with her life. Well, this made Pete even more resistant to getting help because Portia divorced him after going to therapy. And here he was, all alone. So this is what can happen when you don't get help when you're struggling in relationship. And here, Portia was totally committed to the relationship, to the marriage, and was willing to work on it. Yet because Pete refused to get help, the marriage fell apart. And to think, if Pete had only agreed to get help, how the relationship could have grown and how he could have grown. And I have to say, it takes real commitment and effort to nurture a relationship. And when you do, the results can be amazing. Well, I'm not done with Pete's story yet. I'll come back to it. But first, I want to talk more about why it's important to get help for your relationship when you're struggling or having a difficult time. And number one, I think, and I say this a lot, is because we as men have been conditioned not to seek help, not to be emotionally vulnerable, because you think it means you're weak. We're not taught to communicate openly and how to be supportive and empathetic. And especially the older you are, the more likely you were conditioned to be this way. So it's not our fault, right? We can say that, yet it is our responsibility to change this conditioning. The good news is you can change. Through getting help, you can learn skills to be a better you in a relationship. I say it all the time. And it really depends on how badly you want it. If you're committed and willing to learn and grow, you can and you will. And when you do, get ready to open up to experience a greater sense of fulfillment in your relationship and in your life in general. It is through getting help that you have the opportunity to find that your strength is in your vulnerability. And it's through being vulnerable that you build trust. Getting help to learn how to communicate mindfully, openly, supportively, and effectively can help in resolving conflict much easier and in sustaining the relationship much longer. Learning about how to express empathy and compassion and making sure your spouse or partner feels heard and understood can help with deepening your connection and intimacy, and again, trust as well. Getting help is good for your own personal growth, for your self-confidence, for your self-esteem, your overall mental health, and can improve the quality of your life. There are health benefits to getting help as well, helping you to handle your emotions and reduce stress, which can lead to a longer life. And if you have kids, getting help will benefit them. Yeah, you get to be a role model for healthy behavior in relationship for their future relationships, and to help keep the family stable and loving. If you want to achieve longevity in your relationship, as I mentioned earlier, getting help will help you get through the bumps in the road that can get in the way of the long term of your relationship. And ultimately, getting help and paying it forward simply makes the world a better place, right? Yeah, of course. So those are just some of the reasons why getting help for your relationship is so important. Now, let me get back to Pete's story. As I mentioned, Pete had been resistant to getting any help in his marriage to Portia, and their marriage ended in divorce. Well, let's fast forward a few years later, where Pete had become a complete mess. He was a shell of himself, really. He was well on the road to self-sabotage. Not only was he divorced and not able to sustain any relationship, replacing relationships with watching porn, he started drinking and smoking weed. He got fired from his job because he wasn't showing up for work. And to make ends meet, he started doing some odd jobs for folks in his neighborhood, but he was barely getting by. He was living by himself in a studio apartment that he had not cleaned in months. His diet was crap, mostly ordering fast food delivery. He gained a bunch of weight. He wasn't exercising, wasn't getting much sleep, mostly because he had to pee a lot, and he was starting to have health issues. And one morning while he was taking a shower, he noticed a cut that he had gotten a few weeks prior was not healing. And he also noticed some dark patches under his armpit. Well, Pete freaked out when he saw this, and he decided to get it checked out. And come to find out that he was pre-diabetic. And his provider told him that he had to make some drastic lifestyle changes or his condition might progress to full-blown type 2 diabetes. Well, this was a huge wake-up call for Pete because he remembered his grandmother being diabetic and having to take insulin shots, and her diet was restricted and all that, and he didn't want anything to do with that. So he realized then it was time for a change. So anyway, his provider had referred him to me for some mind-body coaching at the clinic where I work. And it wasn't until after a few sessions and hearing Pete's story that I put two and two together and realized that I was the one Portia had referred Pete to. And of course, he had no idea I was the guy. It was one of those, small world kind of things, right? Well, when I made the connection and told Pete about it, he came to the realization that it was meant to be for him to work with me. Call it synchronicity, coincidence, or whatever. It worked because Pete began to open up and trust the process. And without getting into all the details of what we did, Pete made a total transformation of his way of thinking and how he was going to move forward with his life. He became totally committed to his personal growth. And the last I heard, he was working full-time, and he had met someone, and that he is 100% into making his relationship work. So that's a nice little happy ever after ending, right? Yeah, well, I have to say, Pete's case is an extremely rare case, and one I'll never forget. But to be frank, I don't want to sugarcoat it. Getting help is hard enough, and doing the work can be even harder. And I'm not saying that to discourage you. I'm saying it to let you know that every ounce of effort you give, and even any money that you invest to improve yourself and your relationship with others, is well worth it in the long run, so you can live the life you were meant to live and live the life you love. And you don't have to wait until there is a crisis to get help. No. Yet that's when most folks come to me. It's when they are in some sort of crisis. And oftentimes it's the threat of divorce that brings men in to see me. Sometimes it's after divorce and the breakup of their family. Now, the crisis of divorce wasn't enough for Pete to get help. He had to hit bottom with his health before he decided to get help. Well, it doesn't have to be that way. If you're struggling at any stage of your relationship, that's the time to get help. No reason to delay, so you can get back on track as soon as possible, or get clarity as to whether the relationship is working for you or not. So why prolong the suffering? Take action to do all you can do for your own personal growth. So again, you can be the best you in relationship. Because if you don't, chances are you will take the same issues into your next relationship and repeat the pattern and then wonder why relationships don't work for you. And I know that scenario all too well because I've been there and done that. And hey, it's my guess that since you're listening to this podcast, that you are considering getting help. You already are by listening. And I know it can be scary and a big leap. Yet if you are considering getting help, go for it, man, because life's too damn short not to. You know what I'm saying? I found a quote about getting help for your relationship. It's from an unknown source. And it says, quote, "Strong men know that seeking help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of growth and a commitment to the ones they love." Unquote. Yeah, and that's what it's all about. And that will do it for this first episode of Season 2 of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the Why Should I Get Help for My Relationship episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. I appreciate you taking the time to listen. Now, coming up on the next episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, I'm going to talk to you about how important it is for your spouse or partner to compliment you. You know, I hear so many women complaining about their men instead of acknowledging the good stuff they're doing. And that goes both ways, actually, yet I hear it mostly from women. So please join me for the next episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the Tell Me Something Good episode. And if you wish your spouse or partner would compliment you more, I'd appreciate it if you would share with me what kind of compliments you would like to get. And I'll keep your compliments anonymous, okay? You can email me at bill@menonthepathtolove.com. That's bill@menonthepathtolove.com. You can find my email address in the show notes as well. And of course, if you have any other issues in your relationship you need help with, any feedback about the podcast, or suggestions for topics for the show, or for any reason, please email me as well. And if you know someone you think might get something out of listening to this podcast, please share the link and share the love. And until next time, keep your heart open and stay on the path to love.